This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnik. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. It's episode 722. This week we welcome Pete Consigli, Jon Isaacson, and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnik. Ashley Easterby will be joining us as well for the roundup. We're going to look today at highlights from Winter Break 2024. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. They're the reason we can continue doing the show. IAQ Radio Association sponsors are AIHA, the American Industrial Hygiene Association, at AIHA.org. IICRC, the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, at IICRC.org. The Restoration Industry Association, RIA, at restorationindustry.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA, at EIA-USA.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are Particles Plus at particlesplus.com, BioPlanet at byoplanet.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnik at cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry to report that no one identified Samuel Langhorne Clemens, also known as Mark Twain, as the famous American author who got married on February 2nd in the year 1870 in Elmira, New York. Here's today's IAQ Radio trivia question. What is Victor Bourgutage's association with ABC's Wide World of Sports? Back to you, Joe.
Pete Consigli is a Restoration Industry Association certified restorer and water loss specialist. He's been a member of RIA since 1977. Over the years, he's been an active volunteer and filled various association leadership roles. Pete is RIA's resident historian and archival resource to the industry. Jon Isaacson, the intentional restorer, is an author and host of the DYOJO Podcast. Jon speaks, writes, and coaches through his organization, the DYOJO, helping the startup phase owners and growth-minded restoration professionals to shorten their dang learning curve for personal and professional development. And my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnik, entered the field of insurance repair in 1974 when the industry was embryonic. Cliff learned the business of insurance repair by doing it, using his disaster repair business as a laboratory. He developed methods, procedures, and products to successfully accomplish tasks which were previously undoable. Cliff's technique in cleaning, odor removal, and other procedures have become industry standard practices and are relied upon globally. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to have you. Let's start with Pete. Pete, I got to get this title right now. Let me see here. The Restoration Winter Break, the Sunshine State Customer Intimate Summit. Give us your overview, buddy.
Yeah. So, Joe, the winter break almost never happened this year. As a lot of people know, it's been 10, 12 years we've been doing the winter breaks. The AML was the primary host until they were acquired by Eurofin. And I had to try to find a host and got really complicated. And finally, I tried to cancel twice, and all my friends told me that, no, Pete, you got to do the event. We got to have the event. We're coming anyway. And so anyway, this is was a real small, intimate event. It kind of reminded me, Joe, of the very early years of the summer camp, and the first 3 or 4 years was 50, 60, 100 people like that before it kind of got to where it is today. So we took a small hotel in Bonita Springs, and it was a very intimate event. It sold out quickly as invitation only. I had essentially a small space for the vendors, and it was a very diverse audience. I mean, I had two of my Australian friends, Owen Boak and Ashley Easterby. He's going to weigh in during the roundup with give a little bit of an overview from the Aussie perspective. And a friend of mine, and Cliff's, we've known for years, longtime ASCR member Jeff Charlton, came over from the UK. and we had we had 5 or 6 companies from the West Coast that came, Californians, and of course, Mr. Isaacson, the Prime Minister of the DYOJO Nation from Washington State, and then a lot of people from the coal countries. So the winter break kind of it really expanded. It used to be mostly Floridians and a kind of a mix between the mold assessors and the mold remediators. About half the audience were from Florida, so a lot of the speakers, but we had a lot of CIH and assessor types, and then we really want to bring more restoration and reconstruction kind of companies to really suit the vendors and really deal with a lot of the issues that are kind of hitting the restoration industry today. So I targeted a lot of the big members, the companies that are kind of consolidating the industry, and we got some good representation. So, by all accounts, we got really good feedback on the event. And so the other thing that I did, and a lot of the actual content for the meetings, and Cliff was in there the whole time. I think the blog is going to be unbelievable. John was in there. This is the first time that John's actually presented. And I think he did a great job. His presentation, he kind of did the beta test for, he's going to be doing this project management. I'll let him talk about it at the REA convention. It was approved for a breakout session, so we kind of did a little beta run on it. And I think it was very well received. As a matter of fact, one of the speakers I see on here, the BI guy who was on, he's on there. Hey, John, I don't know whether you know, the Mr. Andy, the BI guy, said he loved your presentation and he really kind of enjoyed it. So I think he's going to look forward to seeing you at REA.
For those that don't know, BI is business interruption guy. All right, go ahead, Pete.
Sometimes we just make these assumptions. Yeah. So a couple of the things that we did that was kind of a new dynamic. The winter break has traditionally been a technical conference. We had a technical day and a business day to address the issues, and that kind of tied in with the theme of the customer intimate motto is to pick your partners, choose your projects, and collaborate and win-win together. So that's kind of where I think the industry has kind of gone, is it's a consolidated, it's a relationship based, and that's what the customer intimate philosophy is about. That dates back to the Discipline of Market Leaders that was written by 2 guys named Fred Wisserima and Michael Treacy in the mid-90s, and called the Discipline of Market Leaders. And then they did a follow-up book just on the customer intimate, and that's kind of where that came from. We did have a pre-conference half-a-day workshop. That's been traditional that we've done it with the break for years. Mostly in the past, they've been kind of legal and risk management. This year, since that was on the formal program, we actually did a very high-level technical workshop, a half a day. About 75% of the audience attended that. We never get full take for that. Usually the 2 main days are full with everyone that registers. And Bob Lotchinger did a brand new presentation on project management that was kind of a mix between a oversight of a large hotel in Miami, where he was overseeing a flooring installation. And at the same time, the owners of the hospitality group, they had a flood in their corporate offices, and he had to handle that at the same time. So I thought it was kind of interesting the way he did that. And then the other presentations on that particular day was a retake of stuff that we had done for the hurricane workshop last year, and also at the experience in Fort Lauderdale with Dr. Moon, Jeremy Beagle, Ken Siders. They were case studies and science-based information. They did a little bit of tweaking to it. So I think that's why a few people had seen it before didn't come to that day. And they enjoyed the Florida sunshine, although we did get a little rain, unusual rain, and it came for that. So then we opened up with the reception and kicked off that night and took over the whole hotel lobby. We were able to bring some really nice outside caterers in. And the sponsors, Tremex was the primary marquee sponsor, and of course IAQ Radio to support. You guys are kind of the marquee guys, and Cliff and Isaacson are the DYOJO man, are the bloggers, and gave us some really good promotion. The legacy people that have sponsored have been there from the beginning were Sunbelt, the ICP Products, Benefect, and the Fiberlock, and of course Eurofins now is the acquisition name for the old AML. Lisa Rogers and Micrometer folks, they came back. They had been there in 2022. The IICRC has been there from the beginning, and we have a couple new people this year. Phil Rosebrook Jr. and Business Mentors, and Epic Estimates, Bobby Payne. Bobby, interesting guy, and he had a lot of little action in his table. He was the last 2 years in a row, he won the REA has what do they call that? John, help me out here. That they have the vendor of the year that is voted on, and I think Epic Estimates won that. I think 2 years in a row, if I remember. And then the IAQA, of course, those that follow the IAQ Radio, we did a leadership update live with the IAQA leadership team of Lisa Rogers, the president, Jeremy Beagle, first vice president, and Eric Shapiro, the treasurer, and on site. And they wanted a booth for the IAQA, and unfortunately, they didn't have any space. So the ISRC was nice enough to share and collaborate with the booth, and we gave them a prime spot in the hallway for people to, sign in, because all of our stuff was approved for CCs, 14 credits for IICRC, 13 for RIA designations, and we had people, and of course 14 for ACAC. There's a lot of, I don't know, at least a third of the group had ACAC designations, a lot of the assessor types and whatnot. So that was really good. Then we kicked off the technical day. Each day had a morning and an afternoon keynote. And we kicked off the day one with the technical day with Dr. Moon. Did a brand new fabulous presentation called "What is Competence and How do you determine competence? What's the criteria?" Because remember, Joe, the actual what you have it in front of you. I don't know. Tell me the long theme of the day. There was a theme for the conference. Can you read it? You got it there in front of you. Have in your show notes.
I got the conference. But I don't have the keynotes.
No, just to read the theme there. Cliff, you got it there. There's a reason why I have to hunt through the notes in this.
I got the customer intimate motto: choose your partners, pick your projects, and collaborate.
That I had. You had posted it in one of the notes you sent me. I think it was excuse me, choose and pick your partners, get the scope right. Okay. Document in process, deliver the loss, fulfill whatever the customer promises, and then getting paid. That was the general overall theme. All right, because these are the issues that the contractors and the assessors and everyone that's involved is with the TPAs, the insurance companies, the government work, the integration. What programs do you use? What is required? So we try to put the program together that was based on that theme. So we first started off by trying to establish competency, and then we had a series of talks. I'm not going to get into the specific talks. Yeah, there you go. John just posted it in the excuse me, in the chat log. Then the afternoon keynote was Andrew Reinhardt, and he gave a very highly technical presentation. This is Tramex's 50th golden anniversary year. Of course, he grew up in the business that his mom and dad started in the early 80s, and he started working there at a very young age. And he really gave a technical presentations on the differences of the different types of meters, how they work, how you identify false negatives or positives, etc. It was a very high level technical presentation, and I think Andrew put a lot of work into that. So those were the two keynotes on day one. Then as that evening, one of the things that we did that was new this year, we actually had a banquet that was included in the regular registration. It was off-site at a kind of a wedding venue, great Italian restaurant. Everything was right there. Of course, Pete running, it's going to be Italian. And we had a guest of honor there. It was John Downey. John Downey announced his retirement from the industry at the conference, and I made him the guest of honor at the banquet. And actually, Randy Rapp from Purdue came. We gave him a little time to talk about this, the World Congress for the building construction industry. Purdue is hosting in May of 2025 a conference towards the building industry. It's primarily an academic conference, but they also want to involve industry. Now, Joe, you remember, and Cliff, maybe some on the call, they hosted a similar conference where 7-8 countries were represented on the infrastructure in the disaster world. And REA, ICRC, the whole industry collaborated, and we had some information published on that. So this is more for the home builders, and I'm going to try to see if we can bring some of those kind of people in to help support the academics of what's actually really going on in the home building industry. And I think I sent Cliff the link on that. You can sign up for their little newsletter. They send something out, every week or two they'll send something. But it has all the information. There's a website link. I asked them to put it in the blog. If you had it, you could put it in the chat log, and it'll take you. It has the dates in May. It's going to be on the Purdue conference. And Randy gave a little small talk about that at the banquet. Then day two was the business day, and that kicked off with the collections arena. Angela. Now, how do you pronounce Angela's name? She said, Joe, you did a
Byramai.
Yeah, you did a great job. I just call her Angela B. And anyway, I remember I talked to Ed Cross about. I said, Ed, you're always welcome to come to any of my events. It's a long way for you to come from California. I said, hey, why don't you send Angela down from Michigan? And anyway, she was excited. She did a fabulous job on talking about the documentation process, contracts, all the steps that you need to take to prepare yourself so that if you have to get into collection process. She gave a lot of quick tips to do that. Okay, I'm about to wrap the final keynote on the last day. It was Josh Bachman from Viola Management. And Josh gave a talk on the kind of best practices in the state of the industry that has to deal with the integration of all the software programs. How is it working? Where is the industry going? And I think the general consensus was we should probably have less programs than more, but you really can't control that. Back in the day, it was you were either an IBM or Apple, and it was difficult. You went to one or the other. But of course, now in the real world, most of these programs talk to each other, and it doesn't really matter which one you have, and it's kind of can come down. So I don't know where the industry is going to go, but I thought it was important because that's all part of documentation and integration of how you document, how you can get paid on these projects. We had a really nice after party afterwards, which is traditional, and that was fabulous. I had a hospitality suite this year. We had a that's kind of a healthy building summit thing. That was a really big hit. We had a special cigar smoking area. That's a summer camp thing. So I kind of try to put all these little components in there, and I think that I'm about wrapped up here. Let me see. So yep, I don't know. I think that the Joe Spurgeon talk was fabulous. He gave one on writing a professional report. Joe had some family issues he had to deal with, and he actually drove all the way. He was supposed to be there for a few days. He drove all the way down to deliver his presentation right back. I really appreciate that. It was an invaluable presentation on putting a professional report together, which is an important part of documentation. And I think that's about it. And I'm gonna let Cliff and John really kind of talk about the specific presentations in between the keynotes, what they thought the highlights, where everything was. I really enjoyed John's 3Ps, and this is the first time really in the history of winter break that I actually felt I myself did a couple presentations to fit with the theme. Anyone's been going to summer camp for years realize Joe doesn't speak every year, but occasionally if he has something to say, he'll put himself in the program normally the last day. And I did some stuff on pricing that I developed in the 90s, and 30 years later, it's as relevant today as it was then. I didn't have to change one thing. As a matter of fact, my buddy John said, Pete, all those slides, and they were real fancy, they're retro now. He said they were hot in the day, but now they're new again, and they kind of liked all those little cool PowerPoint images and the icons that I had on there. So I appreciated that. So anyway, my friend Owen Boak, we were practicing. A lot of these guys, 4, 5, 6, these guys are going to REA in Australia in June, and they were previewing some of the presentations, how we can tweak it for the local audience. I don't know. Ashley said he thought the pricing stuff may be relevant there. And I said, hey, whatever you think will be useful, that's what we did. We sent all the proceedings out to everyone the other day. The Dropbox links are coming in like crazy. Sent all the certificates out. So, John, what I want to close with this. So there's 4 stages to project management. One is you got to initiate the project. That I tried to cancel it twice. You guys made me initiate. Then you got to plan the process. I did all that. They got the invitations out, and I had to reserve the rooms, and I had to get the caterers, right? Then you had to control and execute, and that's actually delivering it. Then you had to do closeout, and I've been doing that all week, to send the certificates, to send the proceedings, and do all the little stuff you do it. So essentially, this show is a wrap up. The project is done. I'm moving on to other stuff, and then not too short, between Andy Ask and the building science folks. I'm probably going to meet with them within the next month. We want to secure the venue for next year, which we're hoping will be mid-February, and we can start the process all over again. And with that, thank you, and I will turn it back over to you, Joe. There you go.
Thank you, Pete. Hey, Cliff, let me jump over to you. Let's get your thoughts.
Okay, well, I think Pete summed up everything for the event. I think that, what we should do, if you want, is go through, and I can give you, some of my takeaways. And I think John could give you, some of his takeaways and so on and so forth. But on Blockinger's presentation, managing multiple large projects, I'm not sure whether he was, an officer when he was in the service, or whether he was enlisted, but he had a pretty strong military background. And one of the things that he talked about was the best way to manage large tasks was divide it into smaller tasks, each one managed by someone who was going to be responsible for that. I think what Pete didn't talk about is, he talked about this one project that he was doing, a large carpet installation, and then the offices for those people got wet, but he also had a yacht. The yacht was huge. I'm trying to remember how many feet it was. I think like 600 feet was the yacht. He was installing the flooring on that. He had a project going on in the Bahamas and so on and so forth. But a couple of the takeaways were that you need to know your workers, and he said some are more accustomed to talking to concrete than to high-end clients. For these emergencies that happened, and there were multiple emergencies that happened, he created reaction teams. He needed more staff, so he was able to steal available workers from his competitors by offering, some bonus money. He made use of an off-site warehouse. John, I'll turn it over to you if you have anything to add on.
Yeah, I think he said one of his comments on the setting the right team up for the right work, he was like, you don't have your tire team change the oil. And so I thought that was a good, simple point. And like you said, if it's not assigned to somebody, it's assigned to nobody. So it's very important. We talked offline, you divide a large project into smaller pieces and allow people to achieve the goal in smaller chunks, and big things happen.
All right, the next one I have here, Cliff, is the Word of Life Church case study in Cape Coral, Florida. From severe wind and water damage to commercial roof, getting paid in the Sunshine State is not easy. You got some notes on that one? That's Ken Siders, by the way, who's also been on the show.
Yeah, I think that they provide a very unique service, which is, they go in and they assess a building from the foundation to the roof. And I think it served them well on this particular project. And they document cause and effect, and they investigate both pre-existing and latent damage conditions. One of the other takeaways was you have to consider your clients very carefully, because if you're having problems at the beginning of the job with the client, that's a pretty strong indication that you're going to have problems at the end of the job with the client. One of the things I thought was brilliant was that they were working in Florida, and they utilized an office in California to handle all of their paperwork, the estimates, and the office stuff. And then they went even further away. They went to Hawaii, and they would send all this information from the office to Hawaii, because there were these delays, from the East Coast to the West Coast, it's 3 hours. And I don't know what is another 5 hours from the West Coast to Hawaii. So they were actually able, by doing that, to have estimates ready to deliver and documents ready to deliver the following morning, which probably no one else would have been able to do. the importance of good documentation and record keeping, because one of the things that they didn't realize was there was a foam, 3 inches of foam underneath the roof. That foam actually was holding a tremendous amount of water, and they were actually drying the inside of the building with desiccant dehumidifiers, and some of the building materials were actually getting wetter as they went. And there was actually a meeting within the building, and all of a sudden it was like a hose was in the ceiling and wetting everything. And they were able to, because they had the documentation, they were able to go back and prove what had actually happened. But those were some of my takeaways.
I think Ken talked a little bit about that project on the show he was on with us too, Cliff.
Yes, he did. John?
Yeah, I think, what did he say? Don't do spot inspections. You got to think of the building as a machine, and then set up zones so that you can, part of his presentation was just kind of the methodology that they used to make sure that they got as complete of a picture as possible. I think his comment on the client, I never regretted a job that I didn't get, but there are plenty that I regretted taking on. So yeah, pay attention to those red flags. And I did think it was really interesting. I think comments to people that start doing storm work, especially if they're new to it, is set up an anchor, so maybe that first project, once you restore it or are in the process of, use that as a base of operations for your team. And then like you said, Cliff, but I think even that's that application for storm work is what a lot of companies are using, is centralizing certain operations, so not every office needs to have maybe an estimator or somebody that's doing the program compliance, but you can streamline some of that to help even your daily operations, not just storm operations. So that was good.
All right. The next one I have is Concrete Bob Higgins, best practices for testing moisture in concrete substrates. It's the surface stupid. I love Bob, and I think he's been he's a gem for people that are trying to figure out concrete issues. Cliff?
Yeah, he's also a genius, and I think he can talk way above a lot of people's heads. But, one of the things he talked about was a lot of times we only think there are 3 phases of water: solid, liquid, and gas. And he said that there are 2 more that are important, which is absorbed water and then adsorbed water. He said that the pH of a floor is not relative to concentration. And he essentially had this example where he took this glass and he put in some, sodium carbonate, and then he measured the pH of it. And he took another glass, same amount of water, and he kept putting more and more sodium carbonate in there, and it didn't change the pH. I hope some people from the IICRC kind of watch that, because they just never get that. Some other things, he said that all concrete will eventually crack, curl, or warp. That plastic reinforcements used in concrete cause uniform cracking, that concrete deforms as it ages, that vapor pressure and hydrostatic pressure problems don't exist in concrete. Then he had this.
I got to stop you there, Cliff. That is the one that just blows people's mind. I get so much pushback from the CIH world and others on that whole topic. I just think that's something we're going to have to continue to explore.
And his citation for that is a 1965 article written by someone named Brewer, who established moisture migration of concrete slabs on the ground. And that was done by the Portland Cement Association. And one of the things Bob said was he's been in this industry for 40 plus years, and he's gaining knowledge, losing knowledge, and then having to regain it again. So I think what happens is the industry changes and the education changes. One cool thing was that if you took 1 square meter of concrete, it could actually hold 200 plus gallons of water. But to get that same amount of concrete to a 100% relative humidity, it only takes 2 ounces of water.
I think it was 90%, wasn't it? 90%.
I wrote down 100.
You might be right.
Either way, it's not a whole lot of water.
Yeah. Beside the fact, yeah.
Right. And then the other thing is critical humidity threshold. What happens is there are salts that are in the concrete and cement, and what happens is these salts play havoc. if they're the wrong salts. Over to you, John.
Do I understand correctly? Like when you're drying wood, the layers kind of shed the water upwards, and in concrete, he's basically saying when it gets wet, it pushes the salts upwards, right?
I think they both come up.
Okay. Yeah. I think this presentation both presentations prior were really excellent. This is the one that kind of woke up the audience. People were starting to, wait, what are you saying? And it just makes me, here in Washington, you can see Mount Rainier, and there's certain times when you can see it and you think, oh my gosh, I can finally take a picture that captures just how massive it is in our landscape. And then you take the picture and it's nothing like, what you're seeing in real life. And I think it just, even as we're recapping it, it's the importance of actually being in the room and being able, there was great dialogue, with the speakers and obviously high level people in the audience, and people that want to learn. I don't think I can really add anything to what Cliff said. One thing he did say, if you know what to ask for, they can't pull the wool over your eyes. And so a lot of what he was presenting was, don't just believe what we've always believed as convention, really test whether what you believe is fact and plays out in the built environment when you're dealing with moisture.
He also did another presentation there, which we'll get into, where, he went deeper into some of these concepts and then added some new ones.
Yep.
And then I guess the next guy was Dr. Ralph Moon. Don't fall prey to MUS, which is either made up stuff, or if you're a scientist, made up science. And what I took away from him is that it's all about science. Every building material has science behind it. I talked about the scientific method, where you define a question, you conduct research, you propose a hypothesis, you can perform experiments to test the hypothesis. From that you get data and analysis, and from that you draw conclusions. One of the things I thought was fascinating is he had this slide of a piece of wood, and he talked about the different ways that wood could be cut, and that the manner in which they have the same log, the manner in which they cut that wood influences the amount of moisture resistance that wood's going to have, which I never really thought about before. And he pointed out that rift cutting that sawn wood is the most moisture resistant. And he said that we've known about this since 1919, when the Forest Products Laboratory of the U.S. Department of Agriculture conducted research on aircraft propellers. So those old double-wing planes from World War I,
wood propellers
were made out of wood. Yep. And then he talked about duration of loss, and he had done some experiments. He mentioned that OSB expands 30% in exposure to high relative humidity. Talked about window failure caused by OSB expanding around the window and creating pressure on the window and then making it leak. And he talked about, studying the elapsed time from leak to when it's noticed. A lot of people have a leak in their home. They don't recognize it. It can be from, refrigerator, water line going to the refrigerator for ice, or, something underneath the sink, and it's underneath the floor and it leaks for a long period of time before the people identify it. So he's done a lot of study on that. Over to you, John.
Yeah, that was, seeing, the simple tests that they put together to try to test different materials and the impacts of moisture and pressure. That was really interesting. And then his point to using the right materials in the environments. The flip side to that is, even if we have the data, still cost sometimes drives the materials that we use. So even if it's maybe subpar, it's not just the science, it's the market, and then educating the client on, why this costs more, but it is better in the long term, if the client even values that. So
great point. Hey, let's go to halftime. When we come back, I'm really interested in what Jeremy Beagle said about best practices for mold assessments, restoration, and remediation. So we'll be right back with Jon Isaacson and Cliff Zlotnik and Pete Consigli. Association sponsors are AIHA, Healthy Workplaces, A Healthier World, AIHA.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA's multidisciplinary membership collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at EIA-USA.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, IICRC.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. BioPlanet at byoplanet.com, improving human, animal, and environmental health with electrostatic spray technology and advanced chemistries at byoplanet.com. All right, and I just want to mention real quick, and I asked Grayson to put this in the chat, at least three of our sponsors, the RIA, the Environmental Information Association, and AIHA, all have conferences coming up, so please help support our sponsors on their conferences. All right, Cliff, let's go back to you. By the way, I also wanted to mention, go to the IAQ Radio chat search box, put in almost any of the names in here. I think there were two I could find that weren't already guests on the show. So if you want to learn a little more about their presentations, I'm sure you could also check on IAQ Radio. So Cliff, let's go to Jeremy Beagle, certified industrial hygienist, best practices for mold assessment, restoration, and remediation, how to document pre-existing damage to avoid being sued, an important topic.
Okay. I think one of the things he talked about was that there is a lot of bad reporting going on, and a lot of people are really technically incompetent in Florida. And they get a license and they go in and they take a bunch of air samples and they make a whole bunch of decisions, and based upon an air sample. In some situations, it's only one air sample. And what he said is oftentimes the expectation in Florida after an incident is they dry, they sample, and then they remove. And one of the points that he said is, did we really have to remove it? And he talked about some situations where that was not necessary. One of the things very important that he said is testing is secondary, not primary. I talked about protocols and the fact that protocols should be site specific, and the protocol should cover the where, the how much, and the how. He also mentioned that ASTM has published a mold assessment standard that is not very well known. We know on our show, John Lapotere has been talking about that, for several years.
Yes.
He talked about that if you are going to take an air sample, you shouldn't take it on the floor. You should take it in the client's breathing zone. And he said, what is the purpose of sampling? Sampling should be done for a purpose. And he said the whole sampling industry needs a purpose as well. And what is the assessment going to be utilized for? And he thinks that we need to challenge the current status quo to really provide value, for this investment, in having these assessments done. Over to you, John.
Yep. Uninformed assessment means using a scientific process. Exactly like you said, the site-specific protocols rather than generic ones, which kind of builds on what Ken was talking about, even when you're assessing the building. And then making sure that your conclusions are based on the evidence rather than just, not based on evidence or applying prior thoughts to the site rather than allowing the site to speak.
All right, let's go to the next one. Cliff, I'll be interested in your take on Pete's presentation. What is old is new again. Presentation on the roots of time and material versus unit cost pricing models. What did we do before the digital age?
Well, most important thing is I was able to get all the previous presentations on one page. Okay, Pete's is a page and a half. So just to be fair, I think some of the things that Pete talked about is how to put a price list together, who is your customer, and really your customer oftentimes is the person who's guaranteeing the payment. I talked about different options in terms of pricing. You could utilize unit cost, you could use time and material, you could blend them together. And that I thought a very important point that he made was simplicity in estimating avoids this perception of nickeling and diming. If you have all these line items and what's at the end of the line item is minimal, I think that gives this impression that we're nickeling and diming. One of the key takeaways was that tomorrow's job may depend upon your last invoice. So if the people felt that they were overcharged or we're not happy, chances are you're not going to get another project from them. He explained that the hourly rate of a painter is really from portal to portal, and in many situations, that's not for them painting 8 hours a day. It's for them painting about 5.5 hours a day. We talked about the use of different labor rates when you're putting together a price list, for the different types of staff that you may have, project managers, technicians, supervisors, health and safety people. And he mentioned that the two biggest costs are finding the work and then finding employees. There were two comments I thought were important by the audience. One was made by Ralph Moon. He suggested that with pretty much with every estimate, you should add a line for health and safety and have some sort of pricing for that. And then someone mentioned Martin King said that your price list should be kind of like selling a pizza. It's a plain pizza, but would you like anchovies on it and maybe pepperoni or extra cheese and so on and so forth. So I thought that was a good takeaway as well. Over to you, Jon.
Yeah, presentation. It's funny, exactly like you titled it, what's old is new again. A lot of people, one of your many points, Cliff, is a lot of people try to complicate things when really it's a rather simple thing. I thought it was interesting when Pete, pointed out that time and material studies drive unit cost pricing, so they're associated. And I think that's what a lot of people miss now using Xactimate, not even utilizing the tool because it does break out what its assumptions are based on labor and materials, and not utilizing that for production and timelines and budgeting. But like you said, who is your real customer? And the graphics were impeccable.
There you go.
All right, let's go to the next one here. Keynote by Dr. Ralph Moon. What is technical competence? Why is it important? Planning for the day you get sued or are deposed. What do you do? Cliff?
One of the things, one of the great takeaways that I got was that different professions have different languages. And he says that the language used by engineering is different than language used in biology. He also said that building materials have unique languages as well. And we have a challenge to communicate and train the next generation that's coming along. He said that what comprises technical competence is knowledge, skills, the ability to problem solve, and communications. Yep. He said that you should look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I ascending in my profession or not? And if you don't feel you're ascending, you should do something about it. And he suggested more industry involvement or attending industry programs in order to do that. He said that technical competence is different than professional competence. And he said that in technical competence, workers often learn by mimicking. They have apprentice programs where plumbing is taught, or electrician, or becoming an electrician is taught, or carpentry is taught. He said it's different than the professions. He said that In the professions we learn and attend oftentimes through technical education and then through technical conferences. He mentioned that ATP can be a liability. ATP measures cleanliness, not the types of microbes that are present. He reminded employers to keep their axes sharp. And I thought an excellent thing that he did was to get your employees to participate in industry in training within your company by sharing stories of what they learned on the job or how something that they learned applied to the project, and get them to tell stories. And that way, you're kind of raising everybody's education. The final thing I got was that technical competence is really a lifelong pursuit.
Jon?
I think these are still the notes. Oh yeah. I liked the formula for competence. He said, anticipate change and you will always be correct. And then, but also kind of building into your process the thought that what if I'm wrong, and analyzing what if I'm wrong and where might I be wrong? What factors might interfere with my data interpretation? Something as simple as getting your moisture meters, using them properly, and then making sure that they're calibrated. Does your team actually know how to use the moisture meters, what the readings are telling them, and then how to interpret that effectively? And they said, sadly, there's no consequence for incompetence. And that was part of the conversation is, what is the process as an industry to then, he was speaking primarily for the environmental professionals, but the same applies to the contractors is, what is that process of properly educating and holding people accountable for representing the industry, the right way.
All right. Looks like Robert Higgins, the concrete guy, was a busy man at the conference. He also did a session called What You Need to Know About Inspecting and Drying Concrete. How wet is it? When is it dry? And why citations are important to back up the facts. Cliff?
He gave a very interesting case study, and this case study occurred out in San Diego at the Del Coronado Towers. And he was brought in, and this was a huge litigation going around and around. And one of the issues dealt with industry standards. And Bob knew a lot about both the technical side, and he had experience in industry standards. And what happened was Bob recognized that what this contractor was supposed to have been deficient in doing, according to a standard, that the standard did not exist when the contractor did the job. And at that point, his side, won the litigation, and contractor was off the hook. And I thought it was, pretty cool situation there. Okay, other notes. Let's see. Understanding moisture analysis of what's actually in the cement or concrete, that calcium hydroxide plus sodium chloride or salt improves water solubility. He said a measurement of moisture in concrete is not a conclusion. You need to find out the how and the why that's causing that measurement. He talked about how relative humidity probes measure relative humidity in a floor. You actually bore these holes in, and then what happens is they put in a humidity probe, and it's airtight, within that hole that's drilled in the cement, and that's how actually they can determine how much moisture is in the cement. He said that nearly all surface coating failures on concrete are created by moisture within the top 3/4 of an inch of the concrete. He mentioned that heat interferes with the formation of cement. And a lot of times, if you're in a cold weather area, they add antifreeze. Sometimes they add ice melt, calcium chloride in order to it. That calcium chloride generates heat, and they may not think about it, but that heat actually can adversely affect the cure. He said that higher alkalinity in concrete means that it's going to have higher resistance to drying. And finally, that concrete is notoriously inconsistent. So different parts of that floor are going to have differences in aggregate, size and shape, and chemical composition. Over to you, John.
I think he made the point a couple of times. The way most people test is they abrade the surface and then come back in 24 hours. And his big point was, if you want to get an accurate reading, get a reading first as is, abrade the surface, and then I think it was within a half an hour, wasn't it, Cliff, that then take your secondary reading to determine what the moisture is. Because if you wait that full 24 hours, it's just pulling moisture from the environment as opposed to moisture from the slab itself. And then I think he said it several times, is losing the basics, chasing the argument, where basically you come to the site with an assumption and then you're just looking for that assumption rather than allowing the site to speak.
All right. So the next one is Howard Woody Brickman and John T., the roof guy, Hall, from the floor to the rooftop. Howard did an introduction to wood science technologies, evaluating job site conditions, sourcing and working with craftsmen, and what to expect in a subcontractor relationship. And then John did best practices for commercial roof inspections using a moisture locating technologies and how to interpret the readings to spot false negatives. Cliff?
Okay, let's do Howard, I guess, first. He talked about the fundamentals of basic science and the need for meaningful observations. And he gave a couple of reference books, one of which was written by Isaac Asimov. Actually, he actually was taught physics, and another one was written by a fellow by the name of Bruce Hodley, and that was Understanding Wood and Identifying Wood. He said that regurgitating bad information is not an effective strategy. He complained about professionals who did not use technical terms correctly. And then he said he's not a believer in the C word. And for him, the C word is consensus. And he talked about how they come up and compromise, and that really we should be uncompromising. Is something, it either is or it isn't. It's not this gray area of compromise, that's in between. He talked about magic words. He said that wood either shrinks or swells. And he talked about, using the correct terms: cupping, concave, crowning is convex, what is tangential, what's longitudinal, coniferous, deciduous, growth rings, early wood, late wood, rings, porous and diffuse porous. He said that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. He said that trees grow and wood flooring shrinks and swells. He said there's a difference between what happens with a tree and what happens with wood. One of the big takeaways was wood flooring is not a living, breathing thing anymore. There's no live cells in that wood. John, go ahead. I've got a few more, but go ahead. We're trying to conserve a little time.
You stole most of my damn notes. Other than, I think he literally said fear is what drives consensus, which was fun. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, let's move over to the keynote address from Andrew Reinhardt, Tramex Meters, separating fact from fiction in moisture testing, using accurate information backed up by citations, and seeking the truth to get the best results. Cliff?
Hey, Joe, hold on there. That John T had some great stuff.
We go. John T. Hall, the roof guy.
Yeah, he was fabulous.
Cliff, you got any notes from John Hall?
I do. I got to find them. I did not get that far.
I think.
How about you,
John? qualitative and comparative reports with no quantitative data. So I think, kind of the theme that a lot of the technical guys presented was, we're just using these terms and we're just kind of going through the motions, whether it's, looking at moisture, mold, the roof, the building, the environment. And, that I think that was overall the theme of just like slow down, take a look at what you're doing, why you're doing it, and really everybody, whether they were subtly or directly saying it, like Higgins, are the things, the methods that you're using, proving what your conclusions are, and is the data that you're gathering supporting those conclusions. And so that's qualitative versus comparative reports with no quantitative data. So,
okay. Cliff, did you find your notes?
Not yet.
John, go ahead, John.
I was gonna say Pete's probably got he can fill in the can you hear me, Pete?
Pete.
Yeah, I kind of muted. I don't really have any specific notes that I took on the speakers, but my simulcast was working. Joe, one of the things we did a simulcast in the boardroom from the main room. So some of the speakers and vendors, we could watch it and we could see what was going on because the two halls are right across from each other. But John is very accomplished. He has terrific graphics. He's one of the leading authorities in the world on not only the roofing, but also coatings. For years, he worked with Sherwin-Williams. And this is why the talk that he does and also the Concrete Bob talk, they're kind of interrelated, from the foundation all the way up to the rooftop in these buildings and the enclosures. If you don't have anything, go ahead. Let's move on to Andrew's talk if you have something on that.
Oh yeah, no, I've got stuff on Andrew.
Go ahead.
His talk was separating fact from fiction and moisture testing. He talked about the fact that a sling psychrometer, explained what it is and how they never go out of calibration. He said that qualitative measurement information is often useful, with one exception, and that exception being wood. Big takeaway for me was wood moisture equivalent and the story of kind of where that came from. When they were building the London Underground, they wanted to know exactly how much moisture, was in this concrete that had been poured. And what they would do is they would drill a hole in it and they would put a piece of wood in it. And they would let the wood stay in there for, like let's say 24 hours. Then they would remove this piece of wood and then they would weigh it. And then they would dry it with heat and they would measure the difference in weight. That's, called a gravimetric measurement. And that's where wood moisture equivalent comes from. He mentioned that there was a chart of wood moisture equivalents. And I gave credit to Protometer, for doing the research work. And actually I went online, found the chart, and the chart will be as part of the blog. And he reiterated something that Concrete Bob had said, that concrete is not homogeneous. So it's not consistent based on the pour.
John?
I don't remember. I think I had to run an errand during this one. So unfortunately I missed this particular presentation, but just talking to those guys, it's really cool. The Tramex story that they're family run organization.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can work directly with the people that are a part of the organization. I think Pete brought up, they pretty much ship their stuff next day when you order it. But once it gets to the States, then it goes through our system of delivery. So if you ever have a delay, don't blame Tramex. So.
All right. Well, let's go to the next.
I mean, I think they're the biggest FedEx customer in Ireland or in Dublin, and they land everything next day right here in the U.S. And, they opened up before the pandemic, the Orlando office, which is mostly customer support. And they also do a lot of calibration and servicing there, but everything basically comes from Dublin. Joe, let me weigh in at this time. I think we were pretty foolish to think that in a 1 hour show, we could cover 25 speakers, et cetera, et cetera. You remember when we did the Siri conference, we had to roll over to 2 days. I don't think we need to roll over to 2 days. I'll just apologize if some of the people who called in can stay on. Great. I think we move through. We're going to run a little over. Let's complete everything. It'll be in the blog. I don't think we want to run another show. So that's my take on it. So at this point, let's just keep moving along. Go to the next talk, Cliff and John, and let's just move through it.
All right, let's look at Joe Spurgeon, the essential elements of a professional formal report, how to defend your assessment reports, recommended protocols, and post-remediation verification. I think Joe's one of my favorite guests on the show.
All right. He said that if you want a defensible report, you have to write a quality report. And he said that defensible report writing is critical. And you need to document, for instance, he gave an example of documenting if you're going to take an air sample, what time did you take it? And that time is important because that's if that's the first thing you've done when you're on the particular job, you haven't stirred up anything, you haven't disturbed the indoor environment. So having the timing of that sample is important. He went on to say if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. He said the report may be the only thing occupants, the insurance company, or attorney will see. The report documents condition, the inspection process, and the results of the inspection. The report informs about the significance of the findings. The report communicates information. Data in the report is usable and actionable. And when you write a report, you may be called upon to defend the report in either a deposition or during a trial.
John?
I think it was during the question and answer portion, but they're talking about what should you do if the opposing side brings in really terrible expert witnesses? Do you want to get them thrown out or dismissed? And he goes, no, I love having them on the stand. So yeah, usable, actionable information. Again, like it doesn't have to be super complex, but it just needs to make sense.
All right.
Hey, Joe, the one thing I'll dovetail, I think that Joe's talk about reports really dovetailed off of what Jeremy was talking about. When Jeremy just used the case study and showed there were just so many bad reports, Joe came in because he gets requested to do a lot of reviews, and he said it's embarrassing, some of the things he sees in professional reports. So.
I agree. All right, Huey Miller. One guy we have not had so far on the show, but we will be getting him. Lessons learned from storm response preparedness, mobilization, and logistics in an affected region, working as a subcontractor and managing the crews to deliver on the prime contractor's customer promise and assure you get paid. Cliff?
Joe,
okay. Joe. Omaha. Wait. Go ahead.
You're saying he's been elusive on the show for IAQ Radio?
No, I don't know that we've had him on the show.
Yeah,
I think he must be a slippery little snake because he missed the event.
Okay, all right.
No, listen. Let me tell you what happened here. Cliff was smiling like the cat that ate the canary there. Huey's had some critical family issues, and he couldn't come. He was trying to come, and I have his presentation. I knew all about his presentation. It was fabulous. Anyway, I gave the key talking points. Now, if Cliff took some notes, I defer to Cliff or John to give some notes, but I gave Huey's presentation about 15 minutes instead of the half hour he had allotted. I hit a lot of the key talking points, guys. Spent a lot of time with him. It was an important talk. I hope in the future I'll have him come back and maybe do something more significant. Cliff, did you take some notes on Huey's talking points?
Yeah, no, of course. First of all, if you're from Louisiana, you don't like or trust outsiders. And that Huey's second generation, his son is in the business now with him, is third generation. Huey's work responding to catastrophes has mainly been in the role of a subcontractor, and he had some excellent pre-catastrophe preparation tips. He said one is money. Cash is king, and if you can't afford to go, you shouldn't go. Expectations, everyone's going to have them. You're going to have them. Your client's going to have them. The contractor for whom you're partnering with is going to have them. A big part of it is generators. You're going to need generators to run your drying equipment. Pete brought up the point of eminent domain. And what can happen is FEMA, the government, can come in and actually take your equipment under the right of eminent domain. Eventually you'll get it back. Eventually you'll get paid for it, but that can be years later. Talked about the importance of logistics and, kind of having a plan, not doing it by the seat of your pants. The importance of picking your projects carefully, and then even choosing your partners more carefully so that you can win-win together. So those are my takeaways from Yui.
All right. Well, let's keep going. Mike McGinnis and Jeremy Beagle, risk assessment model and understanding the roles and goals of multidisciplinary approach to a successful project completion. Cliff?
Okay, Jeremy Beagle, risk management. He talked about frequency, money, severity, hazards, events, and consequences. And he talked about what is a competent person. Certification may not have any accreditation, like ACAC has third-party accreditation, the IICRC's does not. Certification may or may not require continuing education. There's some programs you get your license and you're done. In other areas, you have to get the continuing educational credits. He said that licensing may not have any requirement for field experience whatsoever. Talked about PRVs, post-remediation verification. In some places, it's air sample clearance. He's more of a believer free of visible mold and confirmation that the remediation protocol has been followed. He pointed out that while the IICRC and other organizations talk about normal fungal ecology, no one has defined what normal fungal ecology is. He pointed out that there's no mold clearance standard. He mentioned that air samples don't reflect the quality of remediation categorization. He talked about that standards language can be weaponized, in reports. He mentioned that ATP, when you use it, you don't know what you're sampling, and he concurs with Ralph, Dr. Moon, who said ATP is an indicator of cleanliness only. He then gave a case study of abuse. It was a townhome. What had happened was the soffits were blown off of these townhome buildings. There was a big conversation about what type of water was in there. The initial testing lab company that went in there thought considered it category 3. They did a very costly renovation, and Jeremy had a bunch of photos, and what the photos showed is water really never entered the home. There was a little bit of moisture in the attic, and that was it. And they based this on one sample that was taken. And the sample showed cladosporium and 2 most common bacillus species and a little bit of yeast. So they had limitation of data, and this ended up being a big abuse in terms of charging a whole lot of money for work that really did not need to be done.
What was the result on that, Cliff? Did the contractor take a beating?
I don't think so. And this was one of the issues, is there's really no penalty, for incompetence. They'd already gotten the money, already gotten away with it. And, that was one of the things that when we get into, Angela, talks about court cases, and, what they need in Florida is they need to have court cases involving some of these contractors that are either incompetent or doing this purposefully. And they need to bring some of these guys to court. They need to have a couple of court cases, and that most likely will clean it up. And until that happens, it's not going to get cleaned up.
I would imagine they look at the cost versus, the benefits, and then just say it's not worth taking it to court. But I could be wrong there. John?
Yeah, I always Jeremy always has great data. I think Cliff hit on that. One thing that's interesting is, I think he said, is it the S760 that the IICRC is looking at trying to make a new term or some ambiguous term that moves away from IEP. So a lot of people have opinions about that. So if that's important to you, might want to make your voice heard.
Well, it's been heard actually. Yeah, I can tell you the word the abbreviation IEP does not appear in 760 at all. And what happened is in the wildfire standard, they've created a new definition, which I think they're calling competent person.
Oh, that's a new definition?
Yes, and in my personal opinion, it is corralling. Okay, so the guys that were on the committee kind of got together and says, we all agree on this. We're going to put up these fences and we're in, and anyone outside the fence is out. And if they want to get in, they have to do what we've done, be what we are, and so on and so forth. So
what is the term that you would be more of a fan of, or is that even the right question?
Well, it's really not the term. It's whether there's a need or not. Okay. And I've never been a big fan of
the oversight.
Well, no, I've never been a big fan of what happened with S520, where all of a sudden people who don't know how to do a remediation job are writing protocols. And most of the time they've never done the job. They don't know how to write a protocol. So they call their buddy and they ask him for one of his protocols. And then that becomes their protocol for your project. And it's not site specific. And Joe's laughing because he knows it's true. and I mean, that's what happens. And what happens is these guys are running out of mold work, and they see fire restoration and wildfire cleanup is the next mold is gold.
The IEP Full Employment Act Part 2.
That's right. And it ain't going to happen on my watch if there's anything I can do about it. So.
All right, let's go to Andrea Byramai.
No. We can't forget. Oh, we can't forget Mike McGinnis.
Mikey. Oh, I'm sorry. Mike McGinnis, of course. Always an interesting character there.
Very, very
Jersey Mike.
Jersey Mike.
Cliff.
Okay, very interesting. Mike did a presentation on risk communication and conflict resolution. Again, he always has his 4 Ps: people, pathways, pressure, and pollutants. And he gave a case history of responding to community outrage. There's a school in New Jersey. They were getting ready to do some construction. They were moving some dirt outside, and they happened to have found some pesticides that had been stored on the property. All of a sudden, word got out there were pesticides there. They brought in an environmental company. They go in and they get everyone all fired up and so on and so forth. And he had some video, television video of these meetings where they had the mayor, where they had, people from the school district, and they had, in the audience, all these parents, and they're screaming and pointing fingers. And I mean, it's like a mob, and the whole thing really didn't need to happen. And a lot of this was based on, poor sampling strategy, and they never sampled the soil outside. And Mike ended up having to, when Mike got involved, he ended up bringing in people from the state government, physicians and toxicologists, and people that were really, really well respected to kind of help him calm the situation down. And he gave, there was a Dr. Peter Sandman, and this person has written a book. I think he may have done some work for AIHA, if I'm not mistaken. And it talked about, one was responding to community outrage strategies for effective risk communication. The other one is risk equals hazard plus outrage. Really, really good stuff. And when asked about what Mike does for a living, his answer is always that he is a building pathologist.
And we had Dr. Sandman on the show actually a long time ago, Cliff. Risk times outrage equal hazard. I forget the exact formula, but put him in the search box, and that was a great show. John?
Hey, Joe. John, you got any points on McGinnis? I got one little final thing I want to say in him, but go first, John.
I think just the one thing I could add to what Pete said, testing is never your first step. Again, very logical process, and making sure you're doing right by the client.
Pete.
Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah. One of the things that Mike has done this IAQ, the roles and goals and IAQ emergency. He's done it for the Bill Turner Group before summer camp, the Maine Indoor Air Quality Council, and a few others. And at the 2022 winter break, we were asking, Siri came close to hosting a 4-hour workshop on this. But it just didn't come together. I think next year's winter break, if there's enough interest, I want to bring Mike back to do a 4-hour on this in more detail. And what he does is he shows all the people that are involved when there's some kind of an emergency in indoor air quality, the consultants, the remediators, the government, all of that. And he shares his experience and the roles and goals and where it all fits. I think it'd be very interesting. And we didn't have it before, but I could tell. I think he had a few videos, and anyway, it was interesting. So we kind of got that on that. That's kind of in the pipeline. So now we're going to move to the day 2 to Angela. So Cliff's up. Go ahead and read Angela's talk there.
Okay. Angela talked about contracts, AOBs, collections, and preventing going legal. Joe, a lot of the things that were in our interview with Angela, she touched upon there, and, she added some additional stuff to it. Let's see. Talked about the importance of knowing who your customer is, who's going to be paying you, the importance of having a good contract, the importance of knowing whether or not it's a covered loss, and if it's not a covered loss, does the client have the ability to pay? Talked about managing expectations, communications, the importance of it, good documentation. She talked about using Encircle, and they've been on our program as well, and how an estimator can do a real-time video along with narration, and then the software actually prints out, gives you a printout of what was dictated. The importance of having regular communications, with the client, and scheduling required performance delivery schedule. So if the client's responsible for ordering something or making a choice of cabinets or something like that, they have to do it, and they have to understand that, that could adversely affect the project. Importance of documentation. Every time you have a conference with, someone, be it the adjuster, be it the client, you should make a memo and, kind of copy them back in. This is my understanding of, what we discussed. Talked about having a collection plan where you send your invoices properly. You then call the client and confirm that they've received it and ask whether or not they've had any questions. Then kind of mention when can we expect payment, and then you could gradually escalate as needed. She talked about lien rights and AOBs, making a decision. You could potentially mitigate the cost of dispute resolution. Some policies have an arbitration clause or have an appraisal clause, and she's kind of pro appraisal. When you can get that to happen. She talked about a reason for getting involved in a litigation, deciding to litigate. The contract has been breached. The client had unjust enrichment, something called quantum merit, conversion or statutory conversion. She talked about doing a lien, and sometimes just the threat of a lien is more leverage than actually doing the lien. She talked about the litigation process, that there are timelines, real important in that litigation process. Let's see. Talked about when to compromise, when to consider it, when not to. And then she talked about industry setting precedents and how important that is. The restoration industry is small in comparison to the insurance industry and the amount of money we have to kind of further our industry interests, and that the best way to do it is through setting industry precedent cases. So if a contractor is really abused, perhaps that contractor should consider, taking this case to court, even going up to the Supreme Court, et cetera, because, a big win really can benefit the industry. Just a couple final things. She talked about always be careful what you put in writing. She talked about potential problem clients, hoarders being one, doctors being another. And one thing that was really a good idea is if you're in litigation, if you're in litigation or mediation, if you ask the mediator as to where he thinks the case is going to settle, in many situations he'll tell you, and you can go to the other side and say, look, this is where we're going to end up. Why don't we just go ahead and settle it now for that amount of money? So
yeah, instead of spending a bunch of money getting there anyway. So
right.
Okay,
really good stuff.
John, any thoughts on Angela Bairamai?
She did a great job. I think a big portion of her presentation was on communication. So your day sales or being able to collect is impacted by regular and systematic communication. And then to Cliff's point, she gave some examples of some emails, and it's, be very careful what you put in writing, especially on your company, phone and email. Inter office communication will be subpoenaed. And then communication throughout that process. So once especially it's going to litigation, don't put it in an email or even a text unless your lawyer advises you to do so.
All right, let's go to the next one. This is Jon Isaacson, the 3 P's of project management: people management, project management, and process management. An interpretive presentation of PMBOK's 4 principles of project management. Cliff, what were your impressions on Mr. Isaacson's presentation?
Really, really good presentation. I think he needed a little bit more time, though. I think that it was like a fire hose. I mean, he was giving information, and being on the receiving end, it was kind of difficult to keep up with it. But the things that I took away were that scope drives the estimate drives the contract, the importance of thorough data capture and accuracy in this data capture and data input, the importance of communication, both positive and negative. You need to communicate. The importance of an agreed scope and understanding what is or isn't in your contract, that project management is an organizational issue, and that project managers need the support of the firm and the production team. I never really thought about some of these things, that it's an organizational issue. I never thought about the fact that the project manager's project has many determinations made by others. And other people set the parameters, other people set the price, and it's the project manager's job to try to bring this in on time and on budget. And he doesn't really control his destiny all the time. He talked about people, projects, and processes, scheduling, and pre-production, production or adaption, procurement. And John also mentioned about material selections on the part of the client, that they want something that's custom made, or it takes a lot of time. If their materials are not there when the project manager needs them, they kind of got to move over to their next job. They can't just stop and wait for this stuff to happen. We talked about integrated project management, using a Gantt chart, using a spreadsheet, or having a computer program upon which you can visibly see the information. He said the same thing that Blockinger said: top down, a task assigned to everybody is a task assigned to nobody. the importance of having weekly updates, and on a board, you should be able to see the percentage of each job completed, the estimated date of completion, what work was completed, what's the plan for next week, any delays. And, we updated all parties. He said that your people are always the X factor. He said that project management is a customer management issue, and hiring burnt out contractors as project managers should be renamed customer management. He talked about project management training. They should be polite, try to create a relevant personal link with the client and then manage the expectations. And said that project management is organizationally dependent. There's a model on how you should do it, and you should look in a mirror. The thing I took about that I thought was the most telling comment is when a project manager delivers a project on time and on budget, next time he's going to be expected to do better, to do faster and higher profit. And very, very true. Very true.
Hey, Joe, one quick comment on that, off of Cliff's comment. John had submitted this exact presentation to REA, and it got approved as a breakout session. He actually thought he had an hour, but he has 45 minutes there. And so I only had a half hour on the program, so it was a training wheel thing. But at REA, he'll have more time to really kind of do detail and tweak it as he wants. So
sounds like Cliff got a lot of notes out of a half an hour presentation.
No, Cliff got a lot of notes, and John really did a good job, and he had a nice style about him. And anyway, back to you, Joe.
All right. So, John, do you want to add anything, or should we move on?
I just I saw a lot of people falling asleep. So the blog, if you missed anything, Pete's blog will cover it. So
yeah, no. Hey, by the way, so the PMBOK, that stands for PMBOK. That is the property, the project management body of knowledge. That's a worldwide organization. It's a 700-page document.
Thank you. I was wondering about that, Pete. All right, let's go to the TED Talk, using customized pricing guide as a competitive advantage.
Managers and about what comes from that PMBOK. Yeah. Right.
Consigli says, in the pre-digital age, restorers asked insurers to be on their approved carrier list. Boy, have things changed. Yes, they have. Cliff?
Okay, let's see. Pete. He talked about positioning and that recent Trout, the authors wrote a book on positioning. Let's see. The restoration is always an expense. Scope dictates price. Liability affects scope. Poor communication increases liability. Losing control of the loss. Clients have the fear of being overcharged. The assurance of recommendations, having people recommend you is important. Let's see. He said, don't tell them, sell them. Establish the need first. Precondition the customer's mind. Gain confidence of your clientele. Establish a professional network of people you can rely on. The need sells the price. He's a believer in a personalized, published restoration pricing guideline. Leverage your strategy. Defending yesterday is far more risky than making tomorrow. That's it. That's all I had for P.
Right.
Yeah, I think that sell the need and then meet the need. I think too, I think Pete kind of brought it up. It's, a lot of times we're thinking, what we want as a contractor, and then communicating in contractor speak. So break it down in a way that they understand. It's definitely something, as this relates to pricing, customers aren't used to seeing like an exactimate, estimate. And so helping them understand what that actually means so that you can tell them, what we are doing. Focus on what their needs are, and then how your team is uniquely equipped to meet that need. And then the project should sell itself for the most part.
All right, let's go to John Lapotaire, Ken Larson, and Ken Siders, an all-star Sunshine State Trio offer their unique perspective on working and responding to cat events around Florida and other hurricane-prone regions from Texas to the Caribbean. Cliff?
Okay, John Lopoter went first, and he's going to talk about a large project that he did, and a project that actually got redamaged while he was doing it because another storm hit it. And the one thing is he did this very, very large project, and 3 words were important: no environmental sampling. So they did this job, and they did no environmental sampling. John's company only works in Florida only. He stays local. This particular project was a resort and spa that was originally started being built in 1888. And on September 29th, 2022, there was 19 to 21 inches of rain and 82-mile-an-hour winds. He had a 15,000 square foot spa that was part of a 40,000 square foot building, and also had 16,000 square feet of exhibit space. And his focus was to get this project open on January 1st because they had events and so on and so forth booked in there. The owner and staff stayed through the storm, so they were kind of trying to protect their building, and that kind of showed what kind of people they were. They loved the building, and they tried to protect it. So there was a good team, and the importance of a good team to take over the project when John and his people were done, because they were just doing remediation. They weren't doing the reconstruction or any of that. So it was important to have a good team prepared to take over. The building was very complicated, and some parts of the building John described as being built crap on crap. They were inspecting the 4th floor, and they decided to go out on the roof, and what they found on the roof was not good. There were a lot of piercings of the roof from the ceiling tiles, or I'm sorry, building tiles, those Florida tiles that blew off the building in the winds and kind of really ripped up the roof. So they realized that water was going to get in, and they decided that contents needed to be packed up and moved out if they were going to be saved. And they had they hired someone to do it, and they didn't do a very good job, and they had to get someone else to finish it. There were problems with the elevator. They had some trouble motivating a restoration contractor and his people, and then they actually changed restoration contractors midstream. John's scope was really going to be visual clearance, and what they found was in making their inspection, there were some tenant separation walls that needed to be removed, and in order to open up the building, because to be able to remove wet materials and so on and so forth. Actually, the insurance company wanted sampling on this particular project, and John did not. And what his clearance criteria was there was going to be no elevation of airborne particulate, no elevation of moisture, no remaining areas of water damage. And
John's big on particle counts. That's
right. So they're working on this project, and all of a sudden on November 10th, 2022, Nicole makes landfall. So areas that they had already remediated ended up needing to be re-remediated. And again, they wanted to leave everything for the homeowner or property owner in order to be able to refinish the remediation. So that's what I have on John.
I think the only comment I'd add, that was very thorough. He talked about divide and conquer, splitting up the teams in skill sets that made sense, and kind of the forward team, and then the behind the scenes team. And then emphasizing creating a site-specific plan that makes sense for the customer's objectives.
Okay, and do you guys do you have anything on Ken Larson there?
Yeah, I've got stuff on Ken. So Ken's approach was a little bit different. He talked about what he called navigating Florida waters and essential IAQ practices in water restoration. I said that IAQ is purity of air and the impact of air on human health, and it's the aim to improve the understanding of IAQ's role in safety and insurance claims. He said that there were state-specific regulations that required category water testing, and that no licensing was required in order to do this. And he felt that you need to test the water, not the air. You need to be sure your IEP understands the subject. He said there's mold licensing and there's sketchy inspectors, and it's important to test for the degree of contamination, not the mold. He said water category is an IICRC-ism and criticism of ATP for determining type of contamination. Then he talked about a project that he was doing in a Charles Edison mansion where 6 sump pumps failed. It's actually a museum level collection of Edison stuff. The building took 2 feet of water. The custodian turns in a claim, and then the insurance company sends out a house cleaner. And then the job went bad. Drying raised the temperature, and I guess they ended up having a lot of problems with fungal contamination. They then talked about another job, and this was a job gone bad. This was a job in public housing where a restoration contractor goes in, sets up equipment, which raises the temperature inside this apartment. And what happened is the occupant dies. And then the coroner says that the contractor killed the occupant, okay, because of the heat situation.
Wow.
And let's see, this person, and the coroner forgot certain things that were important. He left that out of his report, that the person that died weighed 350 pounds, had high blood pressure, had coronary disease and diabetes. And let's see, again, the cause, the coroner said the cause of death was hyperthermia. This heat was killed him. And Ken said IEPs work for clients shouldn't talk to the adjuster. So if you're working for a client as an IEP, you should not talk to the insurance company. And unless you have to, and there's a need to get involved with litigation. So that's what Ken said.
All right, John?
Yeah, it said IAQ is more than air, license for mold, but not for water. The Edison case was an interesting one. Well, both case studies were interesting, priceless items, obviously that's a factor. It sounds like the mitigation contractor there kind of flubbed that up and potentially could have damaged some real priceless items. And then that's an interesting scenario. Obviously, people from the audience were asking, well, why couldn't the person be moved? And that wasn't an option in this particular case. So I believe that's on. Did he say that was ongoing, Cliff? Like that hasn't been resolved?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's still litigation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think they both are. I think
Okay.
there's litigation on the Edison one too. And I think McGinnis is involved with that.
Interesting.
The
Let's go to this keynote address with Josh Bachman. I've never met Josh. I haven't heard him speak.
Oh, wait, we still had Ken Siders.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Ken Siders, he talked about expanding the role of the IEP. He said, imagine a world of proper assessment, proper presentation, so the insurance company properly funds projects. And he said, we need to consider more than mold. The IICRC talks about fungal ecology determination, and they have category 1, category 2, and category 3. He talked about testing technologies, and there's differing opinions on them, and there may be consensus on the end product. I talked about worthless reports, having a holistic approach. When you go into a loss, whether it's a fire or water loss, you also consider asbestos, lead, mycotoxins, stuff like that. Having a holistic customer interview where you try to get background information on things that may have happened before. He talks about a high-rise condo where a kid goes into respiratory distress and then goes into the ER room, and this tries to determine what has changed. And it turned out in that particular situation, the parents bought and placed in the room a new furniture set that came from Tahiti. The staining was off-gassing formaldehyde, and that's what made the child sick, not mold. Let's see. South Florida, there's a lot of humidity. He wants mold. He's a believer in mold sampling. It's a 2-year-old home. Relative humidity 68% RH, no matter what. And finds out that it's the gas dryer in the house. It's the exhaust vent is plugged, and the gas dryer isn't working efficiently. And then he had a meth lab, and the occupants didn't know that the apartment that they rented was previously a meth lab. Their baby got sick, and they then find out that no remodeling was done. All they did was clean and paint over all the contamination. I talked about Chinese drywall off-gassing, and perhaps X-ray fluorescence might be utilized to determine whether or not it's Chinese drywall or not. But he said oftentimes there's some notable things that happen. The air conditioning coils turn black, copper pipes turn black. And then he talked about a tornado in Panama City where there were coliforms present on a particular loss that ended up. I think the hurricane went over a sewage treatment plant, and I think that this claim that he had was 5 or 6 miles away, and there was a lot of E. coli. But when they kind of traced this, the path of the storm and the winds and everything, they could make this association between the sewage treatment plant and the building. And that was it for Kent.
All right. John, anything to add?
Yeah, I think if an issue arises, one of the great questions to ask that the customer can help input on is what has recently changed in the space. And he gave examples of, some pretty extreme incidents that you might have missed if you didn't perform that, what do you call it, the customer interview. And then 2, if your customer needs assistance outside of your expertise, you owe it to refer or coordinate with, additional professionals that can assist with, an area of specialty. So speaking again to the power of connection and collaboration.
All right. Well, let's try and get this in 2 hours, guys. Here we go. John, how about John Bachman, Business Development Advisor, Violan Management, the state of the industry on software integration and best practices for estimating and documentation in the property restoration and insurance damage repair industry, a huge topic in this current era.
Yep. I think that one of the cool things about Josh is that he spoke about this from a software development perspective. He had some experience actually in developing some software for a company for whom he worked. So, he kind of had hands-on experience with it. He talked about a maturing industry, talked about market saturation and oversaturation with software. He said there's just so much software. And he said there's one solution versus specialization that some software is the jack of all trades, but doesn't do any of them really, really well. And then you can have specialized software that does one thing, but does it really, really well. And he said, does integration really exist? And then he talked about CoreLogic and Circle PSA, the data hub. And he said that an influx of capital into these products hasn't really improved the products. He says there's confusion, there's frustration, and that software technology is not a destination. He said it's something to work towards. He said yesterday's differentiator is today's commonplace and tomorrow's left behind. And pretty
I don't know how you
stuff.
guys do it in the restoration world. There is so much new stuff out there, and it's mind-boggling to me. Jon?
Yeah, is it the 4 C's of documentation: consistent, clear, concise, and clean? It was a great presentation.
All right, let's move to Kelvin Reinhardt and Ryan Stanley, an update on cloud-based moisture testing technologies and software integration for the TREMS monitoring system. We did a show on that not too long ago, actually, Cliff.
Okay, with Kelvin and Kelvin Reinhardt, Ryan Stanley. What they talked about was their remote monitoring system, the utilization of multiple sensors, and that the sensors need to be labeled correctly by location. And he said that there's resilience in remote monitoring. In their case, they have in-house recording, so that in the event that there's a power failure or battery failure, they're still going to be able to have data. They're adding additional meter readings to their software and building it into their monitoring systems. They're talking about integrating their system with dehumidifiers and integrating it with report writing systems. And I said that there's a need for a full toolbox.
Jon?
Yeah, that I think all the integration too, they integrate with all the reporting systems, was piggybacked on what Josh was talking about.
All right. The next one is end user marketing versus vendor programs. And that's a big topic in the area. We got Phil Rosebrook, Peter Crosa, Melissa Hastings, and Ramona Gallagher. Cliff?
Okay, let's start with Phil, because he had some opening comments, and he was wearing his yellow coat and his Jim McKay imitation and so on and so forth. So he was kind of charged with the responsibility of kind of getting some conversation going. So his opening comments were.
Hey Phil, that was Cliff. That was not Jim McKay. He was Ted Koppel and Nightline imitation with the yellow jacket.
All right. So his opening comments were over 65 technology providers for restoration industry, program work, non-directors, that there were 6 iterations of it. It started in 1990. Professionalism becoming an industry. He felt that Kurt Bolden was considered a heretic, and so was Pete Consigli's no conflict strategy. He mentioned that Paul Davis started the Prism Network, which became Crawford Insurance Company's program. And they needed someone to manage their claims. Allstate gets involved with another program that franchise. Some of these programs needed to work with franchisers, because franchisers were in a lot of the small rural areas and zip codes and so on and so forth to provide national coverage. He said the TPAs level the playing field. There's been some acceptance. And that I think what he said originally is franchisers got these contracts, but they didn't have enough coverage. So then the programs had to admit independents as well to increase the size of coverage. He talked about 3-day drying being a generic solution to a global problem, and that there was tension and conflict, and that Pete Consigli created these Donnybrooks at RIA, and we could have debates on whether on pricing and unit cost and whether to be involved in the programs or not. He talked about Dan Chavez said that we couldn't serve two masters. Paul Gross opined. Paul Gross was with Code Blue. Paul Gross opined the person whose name's on the check is really your client. Then he talked about Dave Osborne and Craig Kirschmeyer, being involved in the Donnybrook, that we all have to make our own decisions of TPAs, whether we want to work for them or not. Let's see, Mickey Lee, Ken Larson have, I guess, created this mantra that your project is the client and that's who you're responsible to. And what is the computer telling us we should do? What is the meter telling us we should do? What is really the right thing? Talked about technology driving the next iteration from job site will drive decisions. Let's see. Carriers are concerned about how to manage the volumes of CAT claims change everything. He said that you must be strategic and deliberate, and those that and pick the right jobs and the right business strategies. The industry is built on emergency service. It's coming full circle. What is old is becoming new again. Professionalism is being defined and clear and delivered, and focus on the needs of the property, independence, TPAs. Let's see what else I got here.
Sounds like he'd be a good guy to get on the show here.
Yeah, we probably should get him. All right, so that's what Phil did. Then they kind of got into their their discussion.
All right, John.
I think the first on the panel was Peter, right? Peter Crosa,
right.
Independent adjuster. Where we've been and where we're going. He was pretty direct in some of his opinions, where insurers are at war with contractors and seem to be at war with their policyholders. And I think one of his comments to the contractors and even the IEPs is, we want to do right by the client. And then he stipulated, as long as they pay, we don't we don't want to be working for free. So.
And Peter talked about the importance of protecting the interest of the insurer and their fulfillment of their promise, which is the insurance contractor, about doing the right thing, about having integrity and maintaining your dignity. When people like myself and Pete started, we had relationships with insurance adjusters. And now restorers are becoming collection agencies because some insurance carriers don't do the right thing. And insurance carriers have hundreds of marketing people. And the residential insurance industry is at war with restorers. Carriers don't care about the policyholders who make claims. Things are getting tense when estimates come into play. He's talking about high-tech insurance, how to not send adjusters out and cash out. And that, what they're doing is buildings, in some commercial buildings, they're actually building sensors into the building. And if the water, goes up to a foot and hits that sensor, they'll automatically write a check. And if it goes up 2 feet, hits another sensor, they'll write a bigger check. And he said that the big forensics are entertaining at big industry meetings, and that restoration contractors really aren't involved at any of these meetings. You know, they don't really know what's going on. And he said that it's really about the residential contractors, or I'm sorry, residential insurance companies that, you know, a lot of them are really bad news. He says that TPAs manipulate that some insurers are at war with policyholders, that they've reduced risk by transferring 40 to 60% of the risk back to policyholders. And you can see that when you go to Florida, because there's still a bunch of blue tarps on top of houses and buildings years later. He said that there's an insurance company who owns their own restoration company, and that this company must do your restoration work, and that they're backed up for 90 days. And if you hire someone else to do their work, they sue you for breach of your insurance contract, because it said in the contract that they were going to be the responder. Let's see. Can policyholders afford to pay their insurance company when the insurance company doesn't pay? That's important. He said that as a restorer, we need to vet our customers. We need to vet insurance companies, because more and more there's more bad residential insurance companies than there are good ones today. And they're playing hardball, and they're not paying, you know, they're stretching out for over 60 days. And he said that this thing coming is called parametrics. And they've gotten rid of adjusters, and that's with the sensors, where they put these sensors in the building. If the water comes up, they just automatically write a check.
Jon, anything you'd like to add?
No, I opened the Peter Crosa.
All right, now there's Melissa Hastings' perspective as a director of contract relations in TPA, I guess that's third party groups, and then Ramona Gallagher. You guys got a couple quick comments on those?
Yeah, I do.
She was a public adjuster, by the way.
Melissa Hastings has a deep restoration background. You know, the family, she was in the restoration industry. Her family's been in the restoration industry for a long time. So she knows the restoration industry from the inside out. And she went to work for this company called AccuServe Solutions, which is a merger of several programs, Code Blue, you know, being one of them. And she has a different approach. You know, she wants to do the right thing for restoration companies because she was one, or she considers herself one. And I think she has a different perspective, and, you know, she's looking for input, and, you know, she's looking for people to get involved in their program to kind of try it out, and, you know, to build goodwill. You know, her job is to improve the contractor and policyholder experience. So that's a pretty good and exciting mission, I think. Let's see. You know, she's looking for more opportunities to work together with the restoration industry. She was a speaker down at RIA. You know, she was a speaker here. I think, you know, she's honest. She comes across, you know, very well, and very sympathetic. So I think that, you know, I think she deserves a chance. And again, you know, like in every field, there's good guys and bad guys. And I think we need some good guys in these third-party programs. And maybe they're where it's at.
Jon?
Yeah, she seemed very optimistic. She seemed like, you know, she has a good vision and those kinds of things. I think she's got an uphill battle with that company in particular, and the companies in the fold. So it'll be interesting to see how much change she can affect. The one comment I'll say that she did make, you know, a lot of people bag on TPAs. And if you look at the fee structure and those kinds of things, I believe she said it's one of the best marketing tools you can use as a contractor. And so if you view it from that standpoint, there's potentially some benefits there, which I thought was a good point. Made me think. So,
All right. Cliff, any more from that presentation?
Let's see. Was anyone else there?
Ramona Gallagher, Great
Okay.
Estates Inventory.
Yeah,
Licensed public adjuster.
Yeah, I got stuff from Ramona. Yeah, her company's called Great Estates. She's a personal property expert. She's been around it for 40 years. Her background was originally in retail. I think she sold clothing and high-end luxury items. So she's very, very familiar with that stuff. She got into the industry preparing inventories for clients and preparing them for public adjusters. And then she decided that she was going to become one. She mentioned that many of the known labels like Ralph Lauren or Hermes or etc. have different qualities, Louis Vuitton, etc., that they have a good one, they have a better one, and they have a best one. And, it's from the tags, you can tell, which are which. The importance of being able to identify what you're dealing with. Is it a replica? Is it fake? Or is it real? And, there's a lot of handbags out there. Women spend just tremendous. I mean, they some women spend as much as a car costs on a day bag or a purse.
Wow.
So it's important to know. And ways you can tell is by looking at the zipper, poor stitching, the hardware, and so on and so forth. It's important to know who to call and when to call specialized experts. Some antiques have provenance. That's a little story that kind of goes along with them, the history of the item. Sometimes you need specialized appraisers, reasons for bringing in an expert. Part of her job is to prepare also a total loss inventory and to value that as well. So, determine restoration. And she doesn't do cleaning. She will get involved in like refinishing and, higher end, maybe reupholstering and that sort of stuff, but she really does not get involved in cleaning. She uses a subcontractor for that. She'll adjust that portion of the claim, represent the policyholder. It's important to understand, the insurance policy if you're acting it, or if you're going to be a public adjuster, you have to understand the types of policies and the declaration page and the types of values and different types of coverages, etc. And the approach is unique based upon each job that you would be doing.
John, you got anything to add?
I was looking back through. It was interesting. She had a diagram on, like you said, Cliff, the different even brands, like say under Ralph Lauren. So knowing not every Ralph Lauren's the same, knowing the difference between the values in each of those items was important. It was good overall presentation, and we don't always think about contents and what,
Right.
The depth of that. So,
all right, let's wrap it up with Andrew Saul, the business interruption guy. Cliff, we just had Andrew on not too long ago.
Yeah, we did. And Andy talked about the invisible claim, which is business interruption, and the importance of situational awareness, threat recognition, action, and that time is valuable, and that a business interruption can be a hard claim, can be difficult to document, and while you're trying to do this, you're hemorrhaging cash because you don't have any money coming in. Your business is brought to a screaming halt. You have to be able to realize the threat based on the size of your business interruption claim, and that the insurance company will not pay business interruption without proper documentation. And and what he does is he has developed a proprietary model, and he takes your information, and he interviews you, and he kind of understands your business and the ins and outs of it. And then he can enter these numbers, into his model. He says the insurance companies do the same thing, but they just have a standard model, and it doesn't recognize the idiosyncrasies in one business versus another. And he talked about, I actually asked him about the molasses case, and where this molasses was in a storage tank at a facility that also stored fuels and oils, motor oils, and so on and so forth. And that they originally felt that the loss was going to be about $160,000. And the storage facility insurance company didn't realize that molasses is a food product, and that the tank that it was in was a special tank for holding food products, and that everything for transporting that material had to be, you couldn't use the standard piping and fittings and so on and so forth that they use to pump in and pump out motor oil or kerosene or petroleum products. And actually he ended up collecting close to $1 million for his client in that particular situation.
Wow.
And just by explaining why this had to be done. And he's a very interesting guy. So
Jon,
he's in a little, no, I'm just saying he's in a little niche that
yes,
he fills very well.
Jon, anything you'd like to add?
I make the invisible visible so the claim can be quantified and compensated.
There you go.
Well said. All right, let's go to the roundup there, Grayson.
Yeah. So, Joe, I got a couple little closing comments, and I'll let Ashley weigh in. First of all, Cliff and Jon, great job. So it's almost like Groundhog Day, Joe, because you're trying to finish by 2. I kind of feel like if we took 1 hour out, we're just running a little over for the roundup. But we actually got a 4-hour show into 2 hours. I almost thinking that this is a part 1 and a part 2, and it's like going to be a flashback Friday one day or something, or something like that. It's just so much. I mean, I had 27 speakers, moderators, and all of that in 2.5-day program. It just it was quite grueling. So one thing, I don't know if Cliff took notes in this, but I have some pictures. I got pictures of Rosebrook in the Donnybrook jacket, which I'm going to send out. And then Tramix gave 2 big door prizes away, and it's amazing. So in 2022, Jason Principal from Hawaii came over, and he won the brand new $2,500 Particle Plus meter out of 200 names or so that we pulled out. And Jeff Charlton won the $2,500 full Tramix package, of 200 names. So these 2 guys, I said, if we knew Jeff was going to win it, the guys could have shipped it from Dublin right to London. They didn't have to come here to the U.S. ship it back. Jeff didn't win it this year, but Jason won one of the meters, the CMEX. That's the brand new concrete meter that they rolled out. Jason won that. The other one was won by Josh Miller from Rainbow. So we have actually 2 pictures of that. And I'm going to send that in with a few other photos when I do a news release. The other thing that was something is I had a spouse program this year. Quite a few people brought their spouses to come to the dinners. Some of them actually sat in some of the meetings and the banquets and the after party. I thought that was a really nice dynamic. I think I'm going to continue that. In the Dropbox link I sent out, besides all the presentations, Joe, I had a lot of supplemental stuff like Ralph's ATP paper, Bob Higgins citation. He had 3.5, 4-page paper on citations and all the concrete stuff. I think all this kind of stuff is really important to supplement the presentations, and that's a big benefit that they get. Definitely we consider to do that kind of stuff. The other thing that I want to comment, we gave during the dinner, we had Randy and Downey, I said, gave a little talk. I also let Lisa do a little update on the IAQA, because there were some additional people that kind of came to that. And then Owen Boak talked a little bit about the Australian conference, because a lot of RA members are just industry people. They can go to Melbourne for that conference and then be able to write the trip off and take a little vacation. And of course, if they're an RA member here in the US, they get to pay the RA member right there, which is pretty good. So maybe we'll get a few people to go down. Now, the other thing is, so I'm going to be meeting, you noticed that Don Weeks had put up earlier that we like mid-February, right? Around the President's Day. So I'm going to be meeting with Andy and we'll see about moving it back to the President's Day weekend. But also, they're talking about bringing John Straub and a couple people like that going back to the Naples Hilton. So I think we're going to have a killer event for the building science. And then I want to package a 1 or 2 day restoration remediation around that, with a larger audience and more suppliers and all that as they can come. So we'll stay tuned on that. And probably the next month or two, we want to secure the venue. Now, I got a little funny thing I want to end with, and you're going to appreciate this as a Pitt guy. First of all, we had a lot of Big Ten people there, including at breakfast one day, the University of Illinois, the Fighting Illini, their golf team was eating breakfast with the coach. They came down to practice because it's freezing up there for the spring golf, right? But Josh Miller is wearing all his Wolverine stuff like taunting Downey, right? But Downey's a big boy. So one of the things, I read a list of all the different things that are going to be taking place next year, most of which you've already posted, a lot of the associations. And I said, and in January 2025, the Ohio State Buckeyes will be celebrating the national championship. Anyway, Downey got a big kick out of that. Now, McGinnis, your boy McGinnis. Now, of course, he's the mortal enemy of Pitt because he's a Penn State, Happy Valley State guy. Yeah. And I used to love that rivalry back in the day. Pitt has two big rivalries. They have the backyard brawl at West Virginia, and I had the Penn State game, that dated back. So I had this big poster made of Downey's retirement thing. I actually sent them a little one. I'm going to do a news release on that as the post wrap up. And I actually put the coloring with the scarlet and gray on some of the up there, which matches, the Ohio State colors. And I had to go to Wikipedia to determine where the scarlet and gray came from. Even Downey didn't know that. It goes back over 100 years that those colors were picked. McGinnis, he signs the big poster. Mike McGinnis, and then he puts the saying under there, something like, not we are Penn State, but whatever that Penn State saying is, like he signs that on Downey's poster. We had a little one to get to Downey, so I don't know what I'm going to do with that. But we had a lot of fun with all that. It was just very friendly, cordial. We got a lot of really good comments, and I just think that anyway, I'm so grateful to all my friends and people that really helped me make this a success, because without the key people and just all the support of everyone, it would have been really tough for me to do this. Anyway, why don't you let Ashley weigh in with a couple things?
All right, Ashley. We'll give you the wrap up. Hello, Ashley. You get the wrap up today.
Thanks, Joe. I think you guys have done a great job on really characterizing what happened. It was a great event, a lot of good speakers covering a lot of topics that affect their industry. And I think that's really important for your listeners to really understand, from the law side to the contract side to the software side to the doing it side. It was covered well. Great bunch of people. Enjoyed the camaraderie and the getting together and talking about all sorts of stuff in our industry. Can't say any more. It was fabulous, guys. Thank you.
And don't forget the food.
Oh, food was off the charts.
Yeah. That's the only one thing the food is always very special. Matter of fact, what McGinnis says? McGinnis says, not only is it the most important thing, it's the only thing. Of course, he's only kidding when it comes to that. Anyway,
you broke up there, Pete. What was the most important thing?
Food.
Well, McGinnis says the food. Okay, and I said, I was only kidding, but that's always an important part, because it's the concept of breaking bread. That's how people build and develop relationships.
That's right. All right. So this is Radio Joe saying thanks to this week's guests. My co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnik, Pete, the restoration industry's global watchdog, and Jon Isaacson, the DYOJO guy. Thank you so much. And of course, Ashley Easterby for joining us, and I hope you're enjoying your trip. You look great, by the way, Ash. And I also want to thank Grayson, you Gone Fishing Fisher at the controls, our new podcast engineer, our sponsors, and most importantly, our growing loyal audience. We'll be back next Friday at noon with the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
And one thing, Joe, go Niners, baby. I'm rooting for the Niners in the Super Bowl. So we'll see what happens with that. I had enough of all that Kansas City drama and all that. I won't say any more because we'd have to cut it off at the end of the deal. Anyway, Grayson, you got your hands full to load this up. And Cliff, I know you got a big job the covering all this and John's input. I'm looking forward to seeing the blog and putting it out. There you go. There you go. All right, we got a late checkout. We're out of here. We're going down to see Dinner Bob, Concrete Bob tonight. Richard Alexis tomorrow. And then Ron Mason's coming up. Brittany's going to be there. We're having a whole Super Bowl party down there in Delray. And Ashley's out of Fort Myers Monday, flies back down under. Anyway, it's been a great week. Seeing you all. All right,
guys. Thanks for joining us. See.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.